And good morning, everyone. We're back for our fourth of 5 presentations this morning for the Warfighter Health Track Reprise. With us this morning is Sean McIntosh from Foothold Labs. He'll have a stage for the next 20 minutes to give you his capability brief. Just as a reminder to everyone, this is a non-Q&A session, so please reserve any back and forth for post-event activities. With that all being said, Sean, take it away. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for setting this up and inviting me to talk about our technology. So I'm Sean McIntosh, the founder and CEO of Foothold Labs. We're based in the Kansas City area, a suburb called Olathe. We've been developing lab-on-a-chip technology for the last 4 years with the Naval Research Lab. So the mission of Foothold Labs is to develop a easy-to-use, low-cost, yet highly sensitive and highly selective next-generation diagnostic platform. And this is a picture of our NanoRev version 3. I've got a prototype here. So it's lab-on-a-chip technology that gives you basically 80% the capabilities of a expensive piece of equipment like an ELISA microplate reader or a PCR machine, but it's much smaller form factor, much lower cost. And the key is it's still quantitative. It's also portable. You can use our NanoRev system for 6 to 8 hours in the field continuously. The big thing I want to highlight immediately is that between the Air Force Research Lab, Army Research Lab, Federal Research Labs, and then and NRL, the Naval Research Lab, there's probably 30 to 40 PhDs working on this type of electrochemical biosensor diagnostic system. We've been working with Scott Trammell and Jeff Erickson at NRL since about 2018, and we've had several credas with them. Dr. Steve Kim at AFRL is kind of their lead biosensor expert. We have what they're working on like right now, and we've been invited recently to give a presentation to BARDA. On May 17th, we're talking to their TechWatch team, and we've got a lot of other traction and momentum behind our technology and company. So my background is I was a Navy SEAL for 14 years. I was enlisted for 8, with SEAL Team 3 and Team 1, and then I was an officer for 6 and did lots of different assignments as an officer. I left active duty in 2013, moved back to Kansas City, and an event that stuck with me while I was in active duty is my platoon was one of the first to go into Ghazni province way back in 2011. And we ran into Afghan civilians that had all the signs and symptoms of tuberculosis. And we had no way to analyze them and ourselves for TB. We ended up having to draw our blood and kind of quarantine ourselves in the field until our blood had been flown all the way to Germany and tested for a bunch of different biomarkers for tuberculosis. And it turned out that fortunately we were clean, and so were the Afghan civilians that we had been interacting with. But it stuck with me that there was a big lack of rapid portable diagnostic technology. So in 2017, 2018, I decided to license a novel device from the Naval Research Lab. It's called a potentiostat. And since then, I've been working on it and built essentially all 3 components that are necessary to commercialize it around the original technology. What I'm going to do now is share some cool videos I have of our sensors working kind of in real time. So this is a video from about a year ago in which you're going to see one of our sensors essentially under a special microscope that we have. So that black dot is a functionalized electrode in the middle of our lab-on-a-chip technology. And so this is a norovirus project. We attached antibodies for norovirus, the VP1 protein, to the sensor surface. And then the sensor is cloudy. I'm sorry, the microscope is cloudy because we just added a sample that has norovirus proteins in it that have a fluorescent tag. So we use this method to demonstrate the rapid capability of the technology. We don't have to use labels or optical methods to detect, specific viral proteins. We just use this to show how fast and kind of cool it is to see binding like you are now. So right now you're seeing binding on the sensor surface between a sample that had about 800 nanograms per milliliter of norovirus VP1 protein in it. And then here down on the left is what our old software GUI looks like, the dashboard. You can see a peak here where the binding events were essentially recorded by the electrochemistry and by the software that analyzes the data that comes off the chip. So to kind of show you the full spectrum of what we're working on, that data that would come off the chip would then go into our machine learning software that would rapidly analyze it. So we've developed a variation of the LSTM machine learning method, long short-term memory, and it works great for electrochemical data, which is technically called a voltagram. So I'm going to demonstrate that here real quick. This is a simple prototype we built to detect lead in water samples. And so that data set that comes off the device, we use about 300 to 500 data sets to provide a quantitative answer and train by training a model to understand a new test that comes off the device. So these are TXT files right off the device. All you have to do is upload it, and it gives you a confidence level and an approximate concentration. Let's go with 50 ppm. Yeah, so this one did not reach 100% confidence interval. It was 72% at 50 ppm. We've gone through a lot of iterations of developing machine learning models to analyze our data or analyze other data. And we have learned a lot about how to increase the probability by developing different data libraries and rapidly analyzing large data sets. So I'm going to go back to my slides here. The problem we're solving is the capability gap between legacy methods of testing like colorimetric test strips, like pregnancy tests, and all the different COVID variant tests that have been out there, which are not quantitative. They're usually 20 to 30% have false positives or false negatives. They are cheap and they're easy to use, but there's much better capabilities that are out there. Ultimately, because of this capability gap, the current healthcare system is broken, right? Patients wait until they're really sick, until they start going to see a doctor or going into an emergency room. And we need to push those laboratory capabilities out into the field and also for the military. It takes about 5 to 8 minutes to collect a sample and insert a liquid sample into the cartridge and to run a test. We use a swab kit from Salimetrics. They make a swab called a SOS, Saliva Bioswab. It allows us to collect usually a half to a full milliliter of saliva with just one collection device. Our tests only need about 200 microliters of saliva to be effective. So we always collect much more than is necessary. And in the future, that's going to allow us to quickly scale how many targets within one cartridge we can detect. The goal for our cartridges is they're going to be about $35 each to purchase, and then even cheaper as we continue to develop the technology and scale the manufacturing of these cartridges and sensors. We're one of the first companies to kind of approach the point where we're getting ready to scale the manufacturing of our biosensors and go from making like 200 a day to making 2,000 or 3,000 a day. Here's an example of a project we did last year with NRL in which we detected silver in different water samples and in turbine engine oil from aircraft. So this provides you some an overview of the data and what it looks like when it comes off the device. A lot of times it's kind of dirty, it's complex, but by using an improved LSTM method, we can get high confidence intervals and make a prediction of the quantity of that target in a complex matrix like turbine engine oil, salt water, saliva, and eventually blood. So on this project, we got to the point where we're able to detect 111 ppm with a very small data set. And then here's iron, and kind of what that dashboard looked like based on training a model. 96.6 R value. And this was with a pretty small data set. So what we've really learned how to do is weigh the data that's important and ignore, the data or unweigh that is not necessary to making a quantitative prediction. This slide is kind of an overview of how we envision our machine learning being deployed at scale. We're always going to have kind of test models that are in the process of being trained further and working with pilot projects and working with other companies that want to integrate our technology into theirs. And then they're going to have production models which have been trained and vetted and tested against professional laboratory equipment. Anytime that we run a pilot, we're always going through several iterations of testing our data against a gold standard like PCR or ELISA or HPLC, for heavy metals or toxic industrial chemicals. That allows us to validate the data coming off of our system and then train a better model as we get ready to make it production ready. We use AWS and are getting ready to transition to AWS GovCloud, but we also may use Microsoft. Now I'm going to start talking about different projects we've done over the last couple of years. This was a really neat project we did for the Air Force with a phase 1 STTR with the University of Kansas. This was a norovirus data. We were able to detect norovirus, which makes people sick all over the world and gives them diarrhea and makes people sick on cruise ships most of the time. We're able to detect it down to 100 nanograms per milliliter, which is below the threshold in which someone would start to get sick and have symptoms. And this is in ag runoff water. We were able to collect from a partnership we have with the Kansas State Soil Science Lab. So this is a complex kind of simulated sample in which we spiked in different concentrations of norovirus. We were able to detect it quantitatively, basically within 5 minutes for each test. This is a project that we just completed with the Wichita State Molecular Diagnostics Lab down in Andover, Kansas, outside of Wichita. RSV is a respiratory disease that's mostly prevalent in children and kind of gives them a chest cold and a lot of sinus problems and sends kids to the hospital every year. It also can be misdiagnosed for COVID and is going to be kind of an enduring virus that affects children. So we are able to test head-to-head against PCR, and our data matched up within 3 to 5% of the data that the PCR test provided. This is what we call an impedance-based scheme, in which the more binding events that happen between the antibodies that are attached to our biosensors and a target antigen, like the RSV fusion protein in this situation, the more binding events that happen, the lower the signal. So when we see a clean, nice peak on this, that means there were no binding events in that sample. When we see a lowered signal that in relation to a negative test, we know that that's a positive hit and our data matched up with PCR data. We're getting ready to do a bigger project with Wichita State this summer. We only tested 60 samples in this test, and we're going to get we're getting the funded to expand to 300 samples. And this brings up a good point. We have developed the surface chemistry to attach any monoclonal antibody to our sensor surface. So we can quickly use the same kind of surface chemistry to make the sensors up to about an 80% level. And then the last step is to attach those monoclonal antibodies to the sensor surface. So we could easily transition from making a COVID test to making a new variant test to RSV. It's very easy for us, and this technology is very modular for us to manufacture it at scale and quickly switch between chips. Each chip right now is functionalized and made for one specific use case, like RSV or detecting THC metabolites. In the future, and what we're looking for funding to do is expand that into 4 targets, basically per chip. Some of the other kind of warrior health use cases that we've discussed for the Navy, obviously lab on a chip data analysis. We've also done with SOCOM a small project where we were able to detect blistering agent simulants and nerve agent simulants from airborne samples, basically in our lab. So on the bench, but we were able to detect those with a different variation of our sensor. Our ML, our LSTM machine learning software could also be used for other use cases like rapidly analyzing EKG, basically just reporting data and aggregating it, or a brainwave analysis. The goal of this slide is to explain that our system is a platform and allows us to quickly adapt to new use cases, as we're presented them by our clients. Right now, our hardware, our potentiostat is a TRL6. Our biosensors are an MRL5 as far as our ability to make them at scale. And then our AI/ML software is an IRL5 as far as being able to integrate it into other systems. I've got a phenomenal team here in the Kansas City area and advisors all over the country. Maria Flynn just joined us as an advisor. She has started and sold a healthcare company, a biotech company, and used to run the Kansas City Techstars program. Also, we have a new advisor. Her name's Sherry Coulter Ford, who has 10 years of VC experience and healthcare investment experience. We are primarily funded right now by animal health companies that are looking to get ahead of the next epidemic in animal health. Right now, there is a bird flu that hit the East Coast and is in Canada that's going to potentially impact November turkeys for Thanksgiving. And there is a huge threat to the swine industry in the Midwest and globally by a pathogen called African swine fever, which is in the Caribbean, is in Europe. Zoetis is the biggest animal health company in the world and is funding us to further develop our diagnostics, and is interested in matching funding from the Navy or from the Air Force TAC-5 program. And then we're also talking to Merck and having good conversations with them about supporting the dairy industry, which is a big revenue generator for them. We're also still working with NRL and then Dr. Matt Sheldon at the Texas A&M chemistry department. We've developed a lot of new IP around our lab on a chip technology. And we've got 2 patents that we filed and 3 that we just, 2 patents are in the diligence process with the USPTO. And then 3 we just filed with our attorneys. We've won over $1.5 million in SBIR awards or OTA awards. And we are getting ready to apply for the Air Force TAC-5 program, which will match up to $1.8 million with Air Force AFWERX money. We've also had really good conversations with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency about deploying this technology for CBRNE exposure type use cases. And then we're having really good conversations with a company that wants a THC metabolite biosensor using saliva or potentially breath condensate. Got a little more time, so I want to just talk about how we compare against some of the other startups in this space. Looks like I only got 20 seconds left, but basically we have the sensitivity of Q Health that just went public on the NASDAQ. I think a $3 billion post IPO valuation, but it only takes 5 minutes. Q Health uses a variation of PCR technology, and they take about 30 to 45 minutes just to get a positive test. We have all their capabilities, but we only take 5 minutes. Again, Sean at Foothold Labs is my email, SEAN@footholdlabs.com. And thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Sean, for your presentation. I hope you guys can hear me okay. We are going to make sure that this presentations and all the other ones are posted out there for the ones that join the Trade One Member Showcase Navy Edition. We have one more session left and then our closing remarks. So we're going to go ahead and end this session, and we'll be starting the next one in 5 minutes.
Sounds great.
Thank you.